You're listening to Mentoring Developers. The question from a manager's point of view is, should you think about diversity from the outset and have that as one of your criteria, or is just something that happens if it happens, and it's not something that should be sort of retrofitted into a culture? Opinions. Oh, you fell asleep.
No, Jeff, I've been talking for a while, so how about you, Jeff? So.
I think it is something you need to look at sort of from the beginning. And it should be something when you think about when you get that extra resource, you think, well, what area is my team lacking? You know, what perspective don't we have here? And that can be what backgrounds are we missing? Because being able to bring in experience, whether that be, growing up in a different country or whether that be a functional developer who now we're going to stick into this object-oriented world, that is going to give your team a lot more breadth of experience. And I think that's going to really, that makes it more productive. Knowing, having experience in different knowledge areas is going to make a team more productive, and having that background will help you reach more customers, or it'll help you make more effective code, depending on that difference.
That's a good point, Jeff. Maybe one thing to add to this too is that I'm not sure if it would resonate with the two of you or with other members of your audiences as much, but I come from the UX side, so about probably a third of everything I do is like through user testing. And one of the kind of fascinating things that can happen with like qualitative user testing, and that's just the notion of, talking to users about why they're doing something, is that you just discover things that you never even expected to ask. Right. So the notion is you can test something like, say, for instance, if you're doing unit testing or testing code or something, sometimes you're testing very specific questions and you have a range of any number of possible answers. But often, like with user testing, is that, and this is why I kind of think sometimes with like diversity in teams, is that I think, Arsalan, you were going with this a little bit, but it's like, it's an admirable quality to just look for diversity, because frankly, you don't know the answers that are going to come out of that. And it's like me and my, background and things like that. If I was only hiring folks like that, that's not to say that, other individuals are going to have different perspectives than I am. But if I'm hiring somebody from, like I mentioned, like a different socioeconomic class, different national origin, different things like that, they're going to look at issues, in the context of their own backgrounds. And the more diverse groups you can end up having on that, the more possible questions that might, be illuminated that you would never even think of asking, just simply because you just don't have that, that background that person can bring to the table, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I've had guests on the show before. Some of those episodes have gone live. Some will go in the future. And the common theme has been when you talk to people with, different backgrounds, it could have, a lot of times it's a racially diverse segment, or it could be somebody who is a woman who is struggling to make her mark in the industry. And you hear this common thing where they're not understood. And it's not fair for men to have to understand everything about a woman, how she thinks, because then we'll become women, right? So what we need to do is to involve different people in our products, product development, especially product development, probably in services as well. So in some cases, we have had software products that are completely insensitive to segments of our society. Mm-hmm. For example, there was a health app that completely didn't cater to women's issues, women's health issues. Mm-hmm. Well, men shouldn't be expected to know. So everybody in that team that developed that health app was a man. And it's not fair to say, well, men should know about women's health issues. The right approach would be to hire women. If you're going to build an app that is going to be accessible to the general public, make sure that you have representatives of the quote-unquote general public in your team, right? There was this case where we had these sensors, I guess, for faucets or whatever in a public place where they would not recognize African Americans because of their skin tone, because they probably never tested it. This is not malicious, this is just ignorant. And I know that it will be harder because of the skin tones. It's harder to just test it on white people and say, oh, well, it works. But it's the difficult thing to do is to have diversity, is to accommodate people. It's a hard thing to do, but it's also the right thing to do. And unless we make this determination as a society, we're never going to do it because there is no incentive, right? There are no rules and regulations. This is something inside of us that are telling us that we need to build diversity. So I'm personally really passionate about that, but there are also the other side of the debate where there are people who say, well, we shouldn't have to think about this because we should just be ourselves. Men tell women that because a woman is in their team, they have to now watch themselves. Now, they can't say whatever they want because they have a woman, so they can't be manly anymore. And I've heard women tell me that that's what happened to them or to their friends, where people come to them like, we can't be ourselves because of you. For me, that just enrages me. It makes me really upset. But that's prevalent. That's the world we're living in right now.
So, agreed. And and that's a really hostile thing, towards any woman that is on a team. And granted, I have no wise thing really to add to this, but other to say is like, the concept that you mentioned, like, a group of folks saying they feel like they can't be themselves because, there's a woman on their team. Well, you know what? That's their right off the job. If they, as much as I might morally, make a judgment about folks like that, if they're off the clock with their own friends and family, making these types of decisions, I have a personal choice in that, but it's one of those things where it makes me feel awkward is to hear people have that view. But in a job case, not only do you have just the moral implications, but you also have the legal implications of having hostile environments, that thing. So if somebody says that they feel like they can't be themselves because they have a woman on the team, they probably shouldn't be working there. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and that sounds maybe a little punitive, but is to say that it's like, if that person wants to do that type of stuff off the clock, it has nothing to do with their job, that leave them to their druthers. But on the clock and being in a job where you've got a diverse group of people, nobody should feel as if, and granted, I'm not trying to be in a soapbox, but nobody should feel as they're threatened based on their gender or national origin or sexual preference. And, any of these type of things that just something that just shouldn't have a place in the workplace.
Yeah, and I think that's a big advantage of starting off with a diverse team in mind is that you don't have to worry about, okay, well, we need to toenail in some diversity here. It doesn't work that way because you can have you establish that culture from the get-go of inclusive and diverse culture, and problems like that, there's just no place for those to develop in the first place.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think the problem happens when there's weak management or no management. In our industry, there's this cool trend of just flat structures where everybody is an equal. Well, when everybody is an equal, we have a lot of these people who are right out of college. They have no people skills. They don't know how to interact with people. They don't know how to be politically correct. And being politically correct sometimes is considered a weakness because you're not being genuine. But in a work environment, in a professional environment, there should be a sense of acting in a certain way that's acceptable to society, and also it should be in a way that's pleasing to others, right? You dress up a certain way. Now, this culture, I understand where they're coming from because they're the anti-establishment, the anti-corporation sentiment in the developer industry is very strong, where we should be able to wear flip-flops and shorts and, walk in at 11 a.m. and nobody should tell me that this is wrong, right? This is a culture that we're in because we don't want to be the guy who has to wear the suit. We don't want rules, right? We don't want rules and regulations. We want freedom. I understand where they're coming from, but there's the difference between being rebellious and being offensive is very subtle. And these people who are very young, they haven't really learned the life lessons. They don't know. So the job for a manager, a person who owns a company, who runs a company, or runs a team, that's their job to establish the norms, the rules that make for, a cohesive and a healthy, happy workplace where everybody, like, you're religious conservative, you're Republican, you're a socialist on the other side, you like to wear flip-flops, you like to wear suits. Everybody is welcome. The only way that can happen is if we don't offend each other. And the idea that we have complete freedom to say whatever we want, do whatever we want, we're obviously going to offend each other when we do that, right? If I don't like something, maybe somebody's sexual orientation, I don't like it, it's not my place to comment on it, right? I shouldn't do it in private with my cohorts. I shouldn't have a little group here that says, oh, look at that guy, he's such and such. Or I shouldn't go and talk to people in general. This should never happen. When I'm at work, I should have this respect and honor and providing, just genuine. It has to be genuine. And the problem is that obviously people don't have it. They didn't grow up with it. They have this streak of rebellion, which I have too, by the way. I can be pretty rebellious, but I understand where the line between my freedom, the other person's, I guess, freedom to be is very, very clear, right? And I can think whatever I think, but if I verbalize it, if I say it, even if I, like I said, in my lunchtime and, talk about some colleague like this, then I've crossed the line in my opinion. But it's in my head, and what we need to do, my personal opinion, and people are free, feel free to disagree with me. Go ahead and let us know. But my feeling is that we should not behave in a way that offends people, even if we believe that we are right. And that's the way I think society should work, but especially in the workplace. So you're talking about not going on your soapbox. I love to do that. I look, this is something that is not going to happen. Diversity and, just a good, helpful culture is not going to happen just because, it's in my head. I feel like I need to say it. I need people to come out and say it. And that's the way it's going to become the norm in our industry. And I think that we're taking these baby steps towards it, but we're going to just keep going.
Yeah, Arsalan, just to kind of second that, as well. I mean, it's just like you stumble on not only a very important issue, but it's a hot topic and often awkward, for many folks to talk about. But it's just like that general thing that I think, we're all kind of making is to say that there's a class of conduct that everybody will end up judging on their friends and family, kind of thing. The stuff that has nothing to do with work. We know, people that I'm sure have incredibly offensive views, which are just really, really tough things to deal with. All of us, probably all your listeners too, you loads up their Facebook feeds and they see terrible things that people that are like in their network, thinking about, politics and stuff like that. But all these things are a different context when you're at work, and people just should not have to end up dealing with that kind of like, Facebook feed at work, kind of thing, is to say that, like people should be able to do their jobs, feel like they're getting the respect and appreciation from their colleagues. Everybody's just not being awful to each other, but that whole notion, like you're saying, like political correctness and all, is like, being politically correct in a work environment is perfectly appropriate because it's just that, one person's political correctness is another person's, huge offense, so as again, like I try not to, say like I would, anybody that's on my team, I try not to legislate the way they lead their lives. But when they're at work, there's a certain thing, because not only is it just morally objectionable to allow certain things to happen, but also, they're truly legal ramifications too, especially for some companies. If certain behavior ends up happening in an environment, you have to make sure that it's stopped, just simply for the good of the team as well as the good of the company.
Yeah, I think we all agree on these important points. But my point is not that we should fire people who are misbehaving. My fear is that doesn't solve my problem, which is my problem is I want to solve this malaise in the industry. And that person is going to go to another company and that problem continues. They probably have resentment over this. I want to transform this person. I want to make that person understand that that's wrong, that there's a better way, and have that person change. That's my personal goal. I want people to change in. And if we just, it's good to fire people that may give them the message, but my fear is that they may actually give the wrong message and now they're resentful of it.
Yeah, I think sort of look at like it takes a village kind of thing. You can kind of hope if you build a really good culture that, is professional, inclusive, has all this empathy, you kind of hope, okay, if you end up with some folks who are maybe a little misguided or do have those Facebook feed sort of splattering stuff, you hope that maybe the being in that culture, assuming it's not an issue for the office, you hope maybe that starts to shift some of that, and having those discussions with your boss, where your boss says, hey, this is not okay, here's why, this is what we do here. I think that you can sort of grow, as you grow your career, you can also grow your understanding of what it means to be in a functioning team, and you can shift those a little bit. And maybe that's naive because I don't have as much experience doing it, but I really think that a culture can really positively influence people that way.
Yeah, and you know what I'm thinking about right now? I think that every company, big or small, should have an assigned counselor who understands the values that the company should project and to have in the culture, and actively engage people to make sure that people understand that. I think that a lot of people in these situations, a lot of people who actually are not behaving correctly, they have no idea that they're not behaving correctly. And if they knew it, my hope is that they will change, because they don't want to be offensive and they don't want to be insensitive, but they just, they're kind of socially awkward a little bit. So I think the role for an HR person or a completely neutral person, not a boss, not your manager, but a third person who has authority over this matter, should talk to people individually as groups and somehow find a way to convey the message that this is kind of how we roll here. Thank you so much for listening.
For show notes and transcripts, visit us at mentoringdevelopers.com.